Welcome back to our Introduction pureLIGHT tutorial with the den scene. This is part 3. After the bookshelf, the next question is what about the details on the bookshelf? Taking a look at these little vases here, these are perfect VL meshes. So I'm going to export that as VL bookshelf details. For these boxes, while they are kind of dominated by flat sides here, vertex light is probably all that we need, especially considering how small they are. So I'm going to initially start with VL shelf boxes or such. As for these books, again, hard to say. In this case, maybe I'm going to start with LMA and I can always change it later. Looking at the rest of the scene, I can export this as LMA table, LMA coffee table legs, and especially because this will probably be dominated by a shader afterwards, I'm just going to make this VL coffee table chrome. Similar for this light here, I'm going to go with a VL. It's going to stretch the lighting across this whole pole, but really once we hit the final application, that'll probably be all a shader anyways. So VL corner lamp, and this little box here can just be a VL lamp box. The door, despite the fact that it is kind of dominated by L shapes here, I'm not sure I want to trust what LMX is going to do, so I'm going to see what LMA starts as. So I've now exported everything except the lights, except for the doorknob here. VL doorknob. So let's just bring that into pureLIGHT. No errors. Oh, side vase specifies that's fine. And now I'm going to stop so you can see it's been baking this whole time. It's getting fairly nice and resolved, but really all that confirms is I'm going to get some nice lighting on my chairs. You can see some interesting bounce light coming off the sunlight here. Anyways, let's unmask everything and reload geometry, so we're going to bring in the other pieces. Also, before I burn this, I'm going to actually export my other light sources. So I'm going to take this lamp on the ceiling here, I'm going to export that as OL ceiling lamp. And these spots, instead of exporting them individually, I'm going to export them together as a selection of lights. Now we can only export selections of lights at this point, but it works really good for basically instances, so one set of settings for multiple light sources. So I'm going to export that as LS corner light. Convert those changes, bring them into pureLIGHT. So now I'm going to start bake and see what the scene's going to start looking like. So you can see both these lights default to on. It's taking a fair bit more because our scene is right now at 4.6 million pixels. Seems like a lot, but really the scene is currently using just under 5 megabytes worth of lighting, and that's full uncompressed textures. So in your game environment, even if you wanted this level of resolution for an area, you can then start getting creative with resolution, with compression, for example maybe saving certain lighting as grayscale, etc. vertex light. But right now this is quite reasonable. So now that we've finished one pass here, there's a few changes I want to start making immediately. First, this wall, it gets lighting, but especially with this lamp on the side, we need a lot more resolution to see some nice lighting on there. So I'm going to go back to pureLIGHT and start looking at this. So everything right now is about a texel size of 1. Let's take a look at these pieces. So ceiling. In fact, let's sort this by, let's keep this by name for now. Ceiling doesn't really matter too much for lighting. It's not like we have any interesting shadows. There's a bit of a shadow from this light source. Now looking at the size of these samples here, perhaps we could make it a little bit higher res. Maybe 1.5, see what that gives us, something around there. The floor's got some really interesting lighting going on here because we have our coffee table, we have our vases. So for that floor, let's bring that up to maybe try 0.75. Perfect. Around 256, that should be good. Our books really don't matter, but I'll optimize that. Should be good to start out with. The bookshelf width. The bookshelf's a bit of a special case because it has all these concave areas where you get some interesting lighting and shadow, so we're going to have that as fairly high res. Let's see what happens around 0.5. Now it does have this L-shaped piece, but I don't. If I used LMX, it would break all these little sections into pieces. I think that in this case I'd rather have a little bit of lost space and not worry about dealing with extra sections. Maybe 0.65, 0.625, nope. Perfect. For the carpet, again, the carpet gets some interesting lighting on the floor. 0.75 is probably around good. Now I'm just kind of guessing through this. You could go through your scene and do it individually, or you could set it up before. Coffee table legs, doesn't really matter, it's a small piece, but you know what, 2 is probably fine. The couch, we did the couch already. Door could probably be higher res. Find optimal, okay. The lamp glass doesn't really matter. The large vases we've done already. This table on the side, 0.75. Really, if I knew the scene was going to be around this level of detail, I probably could have set the default texel size over in the conversion to say 0.75, but in general it's a pretty good practice to proof your lighting, get things ready at low res, and then start cranking it once you're trying to get down to details. The walls. Now, the walls are the important one. This is probably going to be the bulk of the light maps in this scene. So let's try something really high res at 0.35. As you can see, that's a 1024 square. Let's try and fit that as best as possible. So 0.3, this looks pretty good. Even though we do have the so-called L-shaped pieces, in this case here especially, I want to kind of keep these sections separate. If only because I could pull this light map into Photoshop and make adjustments, or who knows what I want to do, and this is fairly logical in how it's broken down. Ceiling edge, 2 is probably fine. Floor trim, because it is an extension of the floor, it should be a little bit closer to what the floor is, which is 0.65, so maybe let's see what 1 gives us. Maybe 0.9. Again, I'm being a little bit more anal with this light map resolution than you might need to be. And then this trim's actually pretty good at 1.15. So I need to reload geometry. You can see what's changed, what hasn't. And there's a couple other changes I want to make too. Let's take our light over here. Double click on it to bring up F4, bring up its properties. Let's make that a little more powerful. Maybe let's set that to 3. And then for its inner outer angle, because it is a spotlight, let's set the outer angle to something fairly wide because we want a nice spread on the wall, 96, and let's set the inner angle to something like 30. Should be about right. Now that I've set the spotlights in the corner, I'm going to take a quick look at the settings for the object light in the ceiling. You can see right now it's basically shining just a solid bright white. You know what, let's try something a little bit warmer just to see. So press OK. The next stage is I have to actually start baking to see what this light is going to look like. As you can see by doing start, it clears all the existing light maps. If I wanted to maintain anything, I'd go continue, but in this case, this is just fine. See here, my lights over in the corner are probably a little bit on the bright side for the scene. That's good. I can actually go stop it right now. Bring up its properties, and you know what, maybe power 3 was a little bit too much. You know what, let's also make this one a little bit warmer too. Incandescent lights tend to be a bit of an orange color, so that'll help make the scene more natural. This is actually a good chance to show a little bit about the filtering radius I mentioned earlier. You see the size of these little dots? These are basically one bright texel with a 4 texel blur on it. That's our direct light filter. And the larger, softer dots are the indirect ones, which is one bright texel with a, in this case, it's a 10 texel radius. So you can see ultimately our nice crisp direct light shadows are going to be as fine as these small dots, and we'll have definition, say in the corners for gradation for the indirect lighting, as fine as these larger dots. Anyways, I'm going to remove that lighting just with the hotkey Q, and I'm going to continue baking to see where we're at. So as you can see, I can fly around the scene, move around the scene while it's baking. Though really the best is right now, if I'm interested in the wall, just to kind of sit here and look at it. You can see we're going to get some really nice shadows coming off of the little struts, I suppose you could say, in our lamp. What's interesting here is how this wall is slightly noisier than this wall. And because the first pass, it's only capable of basically pointing out one light at a time per pass. So right now most of these dark spaces in between are trying to sample probably to the sunlight, whereas these ones here, it's nice and homogeneous. You can see where the shadow, because a lot of these ones are basically trying to grab the light on the side. So ultimately, after 4 passes, we should have a pretty good idea on the direct light, and then after that it just boils down to the indirect lighting. So this is pretty good resolution-wise. I'm fairly happy with that, but I'm going to add a special feature here to make this light a little bit exciting, especially because we have such high resolution on that wall. So I'm just going to show you material that I made earlier here. So under scenes, textures, where's that? Project interest. So I made this texture here earlier, and the idea is we're going to use these spotlights basically as a projector. So they're going to project this image onto the wall. Now that could be an actual, say, projection image, or it could be, say, colored light or something interesting. But what I like about this one here is we're actually going to get some different bands of intensity on the wall, and then some just kind of a gnarly pattern, and that's going to simulate the textured reflector on the inside of the light. You can see here now that we're on pass 2, the direct light noise is far less because now these texels in the middle have sampled the correct light, and it's just going to get better as we let it go. But I'm going to interrupt it right now, stop it. I'm going to bring up the properties here, and then for projection texture, I'm just going to select our proj interest. Again, I'm going to remove this and go lighting, continue bake, and we should see that happen shortly. So again, because we've finished 2 passes already, and right now I've only removed lighting on this one wall, pureLIGHT's going to dedicate all the 4 cores here to baking this wall surface. Now it's going to be a little bit difficult to actually see what that lighting is going to look like, just because that texture really is fairly subtle. So what I'm actually going to do here is just stop this. I'm going to isolate our wall. I'm going to then go continue bake for 16, and I'm going to go get a glass of water. I'm going to be back in just a couple of minutes.